topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, good afternoon, South Florida. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the top experts in the field of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. This is the first Thursday of the month. I cannot believe we're already in December. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I cannot believe we're in December already. This year is almost up. Well, that means our hottest show in the country, K. Bender Rimbaum, South Florida. We get more letters than any other show we do. Let me welcome to one of the senior partners, Robert K. How you doing, Robert?
I'm doing well, Steve. How are you?
We're doing good. I got to tell you, I've been doing this now almost 14 years. I've never seen the amount of mail that comes in for this show. People love this show, and I'm looking at your schedule for December. It's very light.
Well, it's light with the holidays. We can't overwhelm people with education when we get to the holiday time, so we cram what we can into the first part. We've already had a couple for this month, so there's still a few opportunities before next year. January will be full once again.
We've got so many new people who are finding the show. Tell people about K. Bender Rimbaum.
Well, K. Bender Rimbaum is a full-service law firm since 1992, providing services for community associations, condominiums, homeowners associations, cooperatives primarily, on all of their day-to-day legal issues, be it reviewing documents, providing opinions as to rights and responsibilities under the covenants, enforcement actions, dealing with the owners that are in violation, contract negotiation with third-party vendors, dealing with city issues, state issues, anything and everything that an association will deal with on a legal basis, which can be significant on a day-to-day basis. That's what we're here to do. The firm consists of over 20 attorneys, nearly half of which are certified by the Florida Bar as specialists in the field of community association, and one in construction defect litigation. We operate out of offices in Pompano Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, Orlando, Winter Spring actually, and then Tampa.
You know, Robert, I don't see how an association can operate sufficiently without a law firm like K. Bender Rimbaum.
Well, certainly legal is an issue that should be on the list of vendors that every association has. We like it to be us, but if it isn't, it should be somebody who is qualified in the area of the practice. You're running a huge business, and that's like a mini municipality. The attorney is like the city attorney that deals with issues for cities, or the county attorney for the counties. And none of those can function without having their legal assistance. There's the law is constantly evolving. The legislature makes tweaks and changes every year. Courts are always doing their interpretations of things that will affect the way that associations can operate. So it's important to have a competent legal counsel that is up to date on everything you need to know.
Robert, we got a a text right before your show. Somebody said that basically they're saying how much they're hurting. These are people in condos with all the new laws, but they read somewhere that Palm Beach County is going to possibly help some of these people. Do you know anything about that?
No, I haven't heard anything specific that of the county doing anything of a financial nature for condominium owners. But there's always some talk going on of some different plans. When the laws kick into effect next month, it's anticipated that there's going to be a large number of communities facing significant assessments, and whether or not the owners are able to afford them is an open question, and how things are going to shake out. Where we need the most help is from the legislature. Their hearts are in the right direction in trying to provide for safety. Given what had happened down in Surfside when the building collapsed, but the likelihood of that happening across the state is fairly remote, and so the urgency might not be as fast as the legislature has tried to address it. And doing so in this manner certainly creates significant financial issues for a great many residents within the state of Florida. So in the upcoming legislative session, there is still hope that there may be some relief, but at this point, it's just a hope.
I want to remind everybody that because we're getting letters about people who write on the chat line, people who call, there is just one of me. Most important one is Attorney Robert Kay, because he's the one who's answering your questions. So what we do is we have you text your questions to me, 954-336-3767. We get about 30 to 40 texts a month. We would love for you to write your question in. I wish I could it's just impossible to handle all three areas. So let's get started. Let's go to Raymond in Delray. Raymond wants to know, how far in advance do condo election notices need to go out, and what information needs to be on there?
Well, the statute was amended in 1991 to take effect in 92. The basis of that would be to create a brand new election procedures for condominiums that has become, in essence, a standard for how election practices are run throughout the state. Homeowners associations don't have the same statutory provisions. Many communities will amend their governing documents to provide for the same procedure, which the HOA statute does allow for. So under the condominium election laws, the first notice of the annual election has to be given no less than 60 days before the election is to occur. And obviously when that was done, mail was the primary standard. Email is a possibility, but mail is still the main method of providing the notice. While it's given 60 days, it often doesn't get there so fast, but that's the first standard. The first notice identifies the date, time, and place of the annual meeting and invites any interested owner to submit their names into candidacy to run for the board of directors. They have until 40 days before the election to submit their names into candidacy. And at 35 days before the election, that gets closed down. And then the second notice is to be sent out as soon thereafter as possible, which includes all of the candidates' information sheets that they provide, and includes the ballots that will be used in the upcoming election with the names of the candidates contained in alphabetical order. It contains an inner envelope to put the ballot in to maintain the secrecy of the vote. and then an outer envelope that is to contain all of the information that comes back with the unit owner information on the outside of that envelope. And that's basically the process that all condominiums follow in Florida.
Almost like the presidential election. And this must be election time, because we've gotten a ton of text in on the elections.
Yes, this does start the election season in November, and it tends to run pretty much through June. There are those that have it in the summer, but the vast majority are through the next probably 4 months.
Okay. Rita in Boynton, if a condo year is from January to December, when is the budget supposed to be finished?
The budget should be done as soon as possible in December for a budget year that begins in January. If you can do it sooner, all the better. But the board meeting that is to approve the budget, it requires a 15-day notice of that meeting be sent to all the owners with a copy of the proposed budget. And that information, so you got to figure by the middle of December, that's the latest time to actually hold the meeting, so that the budget can be undertaken at the beginning of January with enough time for everybody to know what's due and going to be paid in the future. A lot of places still use coupon information that they mail out, so they have to have time to do that.
I'm going to go to a letter we just got in, Robert. It says, is the minutes from closed meeting an official document? For example, a meeting with an attorney minutes, even if the beginning time, ending time, and the list of attendees is an official condo record.
Yeah, there are things called closed meetings. Very few situations apply where unit owners can be shut out of meetings. But just because an official meeting is closed to unit owner attendance and participation doesn't make it any less of an official meeting. So minutes are to be kept. If there is information that's confidential, such as the issues being voted upon, if it involves litigation strategy or settlement aspects of litigation, those details are not included in the minutes, but the participant names certainly would be, and the reason for why the meeting was closed.
Please elaborate on the new SLAP. That I've never heard SLAP before. SLAP suits, and what in general constitutes relation by board against the owner.
Retaliation. Yeah, a SLAP suit is not new, and prohibitions against it is not new in statutes. In essence, the law prohibits associations from using its economic power, relative economic power, against a unit owner by bringing a lawsuit that's focusing on the conduct of things such as making complaints against the association for how it operates, or filing complaints with the division against the association, going to public meetings, exercising their First Amendment rights to criticize the association. Those are all what are termed SLAP suits, and those are prohibited. The problem, I think, overall is how one is to establish the motivation of a particular lawsuit if it's not specifically for the issue that the legislation prohibits you from doing. Like if you bring a lawsuit against somebody because they filed excessive complaints with the division that have been found to be unfounded, that would qualify as a SLAP suit and would not be something that the association would be successful at, and would likely face sanctions if it tried to do that. But if a unit owner is in violation of a covenant and that same unit owner happens to be one that's filing complaints against the association, bringing legal action to address the covenant violation wouldn't qualify as a SLAPP suit, but somebody could try and put it into that little peg just because they're also an activist in the community. So it's not something that we see a lot of as a defense or as a claim, but it is out there and it is talked about.
Robert, we have gotten a lot of letters, people saying that they're having a difficult time getting enough board members. Is that normally something that happens?
As long as I've been doing this, I've heard that as an issue, particularly in communities where the residents are getting on in age. And oftentimes when things are running smoothly and there are no issues and not a lot of stuff going on, it's hard to sometimes get people involved. And then on the other side, opposite end of the spectrum, when the place is a mess and things are falling apart, it's also difficult to get people to volunteer their time to address these significant issues. People have their lives, people have other things that are important to them, but they also have to bear in mind that this is a significant investment to them in their personal portfolios. And to put your head in the sand and let other people deal with it could often lead you to a poor conclusion, rather than if you are involved in doing what's necessary to help run the community. There are ways to participate without necessarily serving on the board. You could be involved in committees. You can just come to meetings and offer opinions and suggestions and participate in the discussions. But it's important also to keep the conversation civil and not be attacking the people who are volunteers and doing their best to operate the community. Oftentimes people are suspicious of the board. They think they have ulterior motives, they're stealing, things of that nature. In my experience, the vast majority of volunteer board members are honest, hardworking people trying to do the best for their community. Yes, there are some bad eggs out there from time to time, but that's very much the significant minority.
So here's Stacy in Deerfield. If no one runs for the board, do you have to have an election? We are 121 units and are lucky if 20 people show up.
Well, we got multiple issues there. If 20 people show up out of 121, the chances are you don't have a quorum, which means you can't have an election. The statute provides in an HOA that unless a lower number is provided in the bylaws, the quorum number is 30%. So 30% of 120 is obviously more than 20.
Yes.
So if you don't get enough people to participate to have a meeting, that's different than no one running. Because when the meeting begins, you have a board, assuming that there's still board members that are there. Most HOAs don't have advanced nomination requirements, which means that the new candidates are announced at the meeting itself, either by nominating themselves or somebody else nominates them. So it isn't known until the meeting date itself who's running for the board. But if you don't have a quorum, then you can't have a meeting. And what typically occurs is whatever board's in place will stay on, roll over to a new term if they're willing, or they can try again at another time to call another meeting and try again to get a quorum. Since you can use proxies to get your quorum number, it's often a helpful idea to go door to door and just get the proxies so that you can have a meeting. But if you don't have anybody willing to run and serve, which means you don't have a board at all, that's a different issue. And your association is unable to function without at least a quorum of members of the board being seated. When that happens, the only available remedy is for an owner to petition the circuit court to have a receiver appointed by the court to operate the community in place of the board, for which the receiver is paid for those services at whatever hourly rate the court approves, which is probably in the $400+ per hour. That individual now has full control over the operation of the association. They hire all vendors, including attorneys. They may have their own attorney as receiver, and then another attorney for association counsel, because their interests aren't necessarily the same. They shouldn't have the same attorney in both positions. And that can be very expensive for a community, far more expensive than being run by the board that the owners will elect from among volunteers. So until the court then finds that there are a sufficient number of board members in place, because one of the requirements the receiver will have is to conduct elections and establish a board. That may happen quicker. It may take time because there aren't enough people willing to do it. So the circumstances will dictate on that.
Jack in Miami, love your show. Our staff watches it every month. Can our annual meeting be done by Zoom?
It is allowed to do annual meetings by Zoom, but it's also recommended that there be a physical location for those who don't want to be participating by Zoom to actually be there. There are people that may have difficulty dealing with technology, and they have a right to participate in the meeting, and the law doesn't allow us to force them to only use technology. So there should be a physical location that people can be at while the meeting's happening, at which point the Zoom is available there. And association personnel or management should be providing that access at that location.
Justin in Sunrise wants to know, does our condo management have the right to enter my condo for pest control without notifying me and no one in the building in advance?
That's a question that may depend on the governing documents for that particular community. Typically, the association has a right to enter in a condominium any unit during reasonable business hours for the purpose of protecting the common elements and other units. And pest control is one method of doing that. But generally, that's done with notice, not without notice. Without notice is typically only available in emergency situations. So that should never occur as described by this particular question. If it is, that could be a problem for that particular association. And that's something that the owners may need legal assistance to look into. I don't think that is an issue that the Division of Condominiums would have jurisdiction to step in on. So that could require those owners to have to bring in their own attorney for something like that.
Well, she was very upset because she was in the bathroom when they came in.
Well, there may have been a set day that they come, but they just don't announce the specific times because they may not know. And they should always knock before entering, but that's something that she should be working out with the association, that she gets sufficient notice before they just come into her unit. Now, there are those within condominiums that may have allergies to what pesticides may contain and don't want to have that going on in their unit. under certain circumstances, they should be able to be exempted from that, but they may be compelled to do other things to make sure their units remain pest-free.
Okay. Justin in Pompano Beach, your backyard, what does it mean to ratify a decision of a board outside the meeting?
Well, this happens quite frequently in associations. Generally speaking, actions of the board on behalf of the association are supposed to take place at a meeting that has been properly noticed and at which owners are allowed to attend and participate. Typically, things happen in between meetings that don't allow for the time to call a meeting with the appropriate notice requirements to address them. But they still have to be decided before the next meeting comes about, just to operate the community in the appropriate fashion. So when that happens and the board has to make the decision, what they do at the next available opportunity at a board meeting is have one of the line items for the meeting to be ratification of that prior conduct. And by ratification, the board is now bringing it before the meeting. While it's already been done, they're providing their seal of approval that what was done was authorized, and that resolves the conflict of doing it outside the scope of a meeting.
George in Coral Springs wants to know, we are an HOA. Can we do voting certification like condos do it?
In order for an HOA to vote the way condominiums do, they're going to need to adopt amendments to the bylaws to provide for that specific procedure. The HOA statute allows that to happen, but it can't be just done on a whim. There has to be a vote of the owners, assuming owners vote to amend their bylaws, to incorporate that procedure into their corporate documents so that it will be that way into the future.
Robert, why would a condo want to change over to HOA or vice versa?
Well, it's not something that's legally available to some condominiums based upon the way they're made up. And it's not a common occurrence to switch from one to the other. To switch from a condominium to an HOA the main reason to do that is so that you're no longer under the jurisdiction of the Division of Condominiums and would be operating under the laws of Chapter 720 versus the laws of Chapter 718. And they are significantly different in a number of ways. But whether it's practical to do that and makes economic sense is always issues that have to be thoroughly reviewed before undertaking it. It's going to take a vote to change. You have to terminate your condominium in order to switch to an HOA, and to do that takes a vote in accordance with the documents, which could be as high as 100%, depending on the documents and the circumstances that are in there. And there's also going to be requirements of approval of any open institutional lenders or mortgagees, or any first mortgagee most likely, which is difficult to accomplish. And then there could be tax consequences in the change. Converting from a cooperative to a condominium is something that's more frequently happening than from a condominium to an HOA. Cooperatives by their nature are a little more difficult for people to wrap their heads around, and the values that they have as property values are generally lower than a substantially similar condominium, because a cooperative is a building owned by a corporation, and owner buys stock in that corporation and gets a lease of their unit from the corporation. It all works substantially similar to a condominium, but is under a completely different set of laws. So cooperatives look to switch to condominiums to get the benefit of the condominium laws and the market value that condominiums can bring over cooperatives. But the downside there is that there has to be new deeds and new real estate transactions, which result in potentially significant tax consequences for that simple transaction, which doesn't really change hands, but does amount to a taxable event. From an HOA to go to a condominium is also very unusual. I don't know that I've ever seen that happen, but that's going to take a vote of everybody to do that, because everyone's got to submit themselves to that particular form of ownership.
You got a short schedule. Why don't we go over your short schedule, and then we'll
Sure.
go to a break.
Okay, so tomorrow actually is our first one, December 6th, the Condo Board Member Certification Webinar. Our attorneys Kirsten Hens and Alan Schwartzide will be presenting at 11 o'clock tomorrow. On December the 12th at 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's a long one, but it's a cooperator expo at the Broward Convention Center. We'll be at booth 526. I don't think we're teaching at that one, but we'll be in attendance. And on December 18th at 2 p.m., the 2025 Legal Update webinars, which will have 2 CEUs of credit for CAMs, and that will be presented by Alan Schwartzide.
We get so many complimentary letters on your certification classes. People really enjoy those, even though they're longer now.
Oh, yeah, they're getting to be quite long.
Let's go to break. Give everybody your phone number. They can reach your office.
Can reach the firm at 800-974-0680. Write to us at info@kbrlegal.com, or go to the website kbrlegal.com and click on the contact box on the first page and put in the information, and someone will get back to you.
Okay, we're going to go to break. We'll come right back with your questions.
K. Bender Rembaum is a full-service community association law firm dedicated to the representation of community associations throughout Florida. On kbrlegal.com, you can learn more about their offices in Pompano Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, Orlando, Tampa, as well as throughout Miami-Dade by appointment. Several K. Bender Rembaum attorneys are board-certified specialists in condominium and plan development law and assist clients with all matters of community association legal issues while keeping them up to date on new developments that affect their associations. K. Bender Rembaum is also a well-known provider of free legal education for managers and board members. Contact K. Bender Rembaum today by calling 800-974-0680. That's 800-974-0680 to reach any of their locations. You can also visit them online at kbrlegal.com or write to them at info@kbrlegal.com.
And we are back with the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV with your hosts, Steve-O, Sophia, and their expert guests.
Back, we're here with attorney Robert K. Bender Rembaum. Hey, Robert, we got I guess this is from a condo. It says, we have 35 boat slips available at our condominium and a waiting list of 17 boats. The boat slip fees are 10% of the ISHOF and Bahia Mar and residence fee. This is a asset of all 237 units, and we should raise the fees. Is it a conflict of interest for board members with the boat slip regulatory capture to vote on raising the fees? Thanks, Kim.
Whenever a board member has a financial interest in the issue that is being presented to the board for consideration, that constitutes a conflict of interest for which there has to be full disclosure by the board member and an abstention from voting by that board member. Sometimes the board member would need to leave the room depending on the issue while the discussion is going on, but at the very least, in this scenario, it would be appropriate for any board member who owns one of those or is somebody who's leasing the boat space and has to decide whether to charge him or herself more money, should be abstaining from that vote.
Okay. This is from Craig in Delray Beach. I love your show. My staff loves your show also. Can people running for the board send out bios?
Did she say HOA or condo?
Did not.
Okay. Well, in a condo, the law provides for the board to give the owners that to the 35th day to submit their personal biographical information sheet, and that has to be included with the second notice. HOA doesn't have that same requirement. If an owner running for the board in an HOA wants to send out personal bio information themselves, they can do that. I don't think they have the power to force the association to do it unless the association's doing it for some. If the association is doing it for some, it should do it for all of them, or at least any who wishes to participate.
How do they get everyone's email?
Well, that's information that's part of the official records of the association that should be made available to any requesting owner.
Okay. Let's go to Sam in Palm Beach Gardens. I'm a HOA. If I'm delinquent, can I still run for the board?
In an HOA, you can be delinquent to run, but you can't be delinquent to serve. And the delinquency, I'm trying to remember now the distinction between HOAs and condos. You caught me at a off moment on the specifics of whether it's the $1,000 limit applies to one or the other, and the 90-day time frame. But we want to look at our appropriate statute on that to verify that one of them is $1,000 requirement and 90 days past due before that problem kicks in. Another one is any monetary obligation. Apologies for not remembering the specifics between them, but that is an issue that should be considered.
Let's go to, Buck in Palm Beach. What is the quorum at an annual meeting for HOA? If we can't get a quorum, does the old board roll over, which you said before? It would.
Yeah, we touched on this a little earlier. Unless the bylaws provide for a lower number, the quorum provision is 30%. So it won't be any higher than 30%, but it can be lower. We've seen bylaws that provide the quorum is whoever shows up. That can be one person. So you want to check your documents on that. Condominiums don't have that same provision. The statute provides for a majority unless the bylaws provide for something else, and that would be something less.
This is from Fred in Boca Raton. Hi, I'm a COA attorney. I'm a COA attorney adds language to a proxy to reduce reserves to the amount listed on the proposed budget. No option for no reserves. Is this correct? The DBPR form has options on it. Thanks.
Well, when you're dealing with waiving reserves, there's a number of considerations to keep in mind. The first being that there's going to be a differentiation after December 31 of this year between what they call SIRS reserves, the structural integrity reserve, versus the non-SIRS reserves, so what would have been in place that aren't the structural reserves, or structural integrity reserves. The SIRS reserves are not going to be waivable, so that won't be an issue after December 31. The non-SIRS reserves could be, and that could be something like swimming pool renovations, painting, paving, roof, those kind of things can still be waived by the owners. But when you present too many options, the chance of getting the necessary vote on any of them reduces. So we generally suggest that a board only offer basically two choices, either all reserves or some other number that the board chooses. Now, understand that the board is not obligated to present the question in the first place. The statute says you'll have full reserves unless the board chooses to offer the owners the option of reducing them. So if the board decides it's appropriate to have full reserves, owners don't have a choice and cannot force them to present it to the membership. So if the board chooses to present the issue, then the board also is empowered to choose how much the reduction will be, or the waiver will be. So in the situation that was described, it would be legally appropriate.
Okay. We got a new board member who just wrote me. Sorry for the lost my place here. Let's see. I am a new board member and found the board continually raise the budget year after year when the monthly fees are not being spent on projected. They keep saving. Sorry, I can't have a hard time. They keep saving the monies year after year and will not lower the monthly fees to what they should be.
Well, condominium or HOA board is not supposed to be creating savings necessarily on the budget, other than reserves. And they're supposed to be budgeting for what their expenses are. And then they're supposed to spend what they budgeted for. Now, sometimes a budget is an estimate of what your expenses are going to be. So sometimes you budget more than you need. Sometimes you budget less than you need. So it isn't written in stone that you can only spend X number of dollars toward this item. If it costs more, then you either have to find the money from a different item or do a special assessment to cover the shortfall that your estimate didn't cover. But to overestimate your budget so that you're forcing a savings into the association accounts that aren't the statutory reserves, that basically sounds like it could be what could be considered a slush fund of discretionary money. Not only is that not proper, but it also can expose the association to tax liabilities. If you hold excess funds over a certain level for a certain period of time, the IRS considers that a taxable event, and they can come after the association for that. And I certainly suggest further discussions with the association CPA on that issue. They should be more well versed into what those parameters are and limitations. It's not something we see often, but from time to time, the IRS does pique their interest and go after some people for that.
Steve in Boynton Beach, can we do our annual and our budget on the same date?
Well, yes, it can be done on the same date, but it often creates some potential problem in implementation. particularly when the annual election is after the first of the year. If your annual election is going to be on this side of the calendar and you're budgeting for next year, that makes sense. But if your annual meeting's in February and you want to adopt your budget then, that seems like you've missed a month, and you're either going to have to collect more in the ensuing months or go back and add to what you missed in the prior month. So there are potential issues in doing it that way. But legally, it's not wrong. Reserves are supposed to be waived if they're going to be waived prior to the budget year. So it's technically important to do that before the end of the calendar year for next year. But there are a large number of associations that wait and do it after the first of the year when they have their annual meeting. We've seen those who have adopted budgets that don't have full reserves, expecting people to reduce them, that they don't do until months later. And they're technically in violation of the statute because they're supposed to adopt budgets with full reserves unless they're already waived. So you need to be careful about that.
Larry in Deerfield, he is in a condo. We have no Kaufman language, and we voted down the reserve. Do we still have to do the SIRS study?
Unfortunately, the answer to that is yes. There is discussion among practitioners in Florida, among certainly the board certified ones and others, that whether or not the Kaufman language that incorporates changes to the statute automatically into your documents applies to this issue. And I think the consensus among practitioners is that the risks involved in not complying with the SIRS requirement on that argument far outweigh the benefits because of the significant penalties that can be placed against any non-complying association. And there is also risk to the attorney in giving the advice. So I think that we're seeing that there's the consensus among attorneys is that this applies across the board.
Okay. And this will be the final question. Richard and Davey, we are an HOA. We only have 2 board members and we can't get a 3rd board member. How do we get anything done to our property? We have tried so hard to get a 3rd board member. We can't trim the trees or do any kind of pressure wash.
Well, from the question, it sounds like they only have 3 total board members. And if that's the case, they can function with 2. 2 is a quorum of 3. So as long as the 2 are participating, that's sufficient and they can do all the business of the association. If, however, they actually have 5 seats and they need the 3rd to get to that quorum number, then they are correct. They would not be able to legally function until they got another person to sit on the board. So their options are to do what they need to do to get somebody. It's important to look to see if your documents require board members to be unit owners. Sometimes that's not a requirement, which can expand the options of others to participate on the board. You could have long-term renters who have an interest in the property that we've seen serve on boards. You can have outside people who might be willing to serve. So that's an option to consider. But without being able to get the quorum, as we discussed earlier, the receivership would be the only other option to get the association legally functioning.
You know, Robert, we're going to miss the holidays. Your next show will be after the first of the year. So we want to wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. I tell Robert all the time how much we appreciate him, but it seems like it's never enough. Robert, we love you. Kay Bender-Rimbaum is the most important expert to our show. We're so glad we've got you. Have a wonderful holiday, and we'll see you next month.
Well, thank you, Steve, and all the best in this holiday season to you and all the listeners, and look forward to seeing y'all next year.
Give people that phone number one more time.
800-974-0680, or you can write to us at info@kbrlegal.com, or go to our website, kbrlegal.com, and click on the contact box, fill in the information, and we will get back to you.
Okay, we'll see you next month. Love you, bro. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That's attorney Robert K. He is amazing. The K-Bender Rimbaum. That's it for us today. We'll be back again with you next week with more Ask the Experts. Thank you, Juan.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.